Complicated grief, it's going to be a harder journey only because complicated grief delves into more of not only your surroundings or your environment, but it goes deeper into your core or your subconscious, depending on what the situation is.
Any of my brothers that are out there, struggling with their deployment or, life in general, I tell them that, hey, to stay strong and to keep holding on and to understand, you're here for a reason and that, your life and what you're doing does have purpose.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Guards Down. I have with me today a very special guest, Gerdine. She is a grief specialist and a pastor. How are you today?
Hi, I am definitely glad to be here. I am a hospital chaplain and a grief specialist. I do work in the church in some capacity, but as an elder,
Gotcha.
which is very close to being a pastor. But everybody calls me pastor, even though I'm not.
Indeed, when you take on those type of capacities where you're the shepherd helping lead the flock,
hmm
it's just kind of like that inherited role, right?
Right, right.
Well, tell us a little more about yourself. Of course, the show is about complicated grief and PTSD, and we're looking at it from a cultural standpoint to see how different cultures view, treat, and overcome trauma and grief.
Well, as a grief specialist, I work with many different people on how to cope with grief, when to understand what a grief symptom looks like, and how to identify ways to help them process that grief. And so I've met people from all over the world being a hospital chaplain. And for myself, I am from the Caribbean island of Haiti, uh, which is the island is Hispaniola, but we share it with the Dominican. Our side is Haiti, and we actually live culturally in a communal way. So if it's one person's pain, is the whole community's pain. So culturally, personally, I grieve. I don't mind grieving people. I don't mind people that I'm grieving, because it's accepted that one person's all of our pain. A lot of African cultures are like that, or cultures of African descent. Um, Sometimes people are very private, and so they tend to grieve personally, and they don't really tell anyone how they're feeling. That could be good, but it can pose as a threat because if no one knows that you're hurting, it's hard for them to empathize or to even support you, when you grieve privately.
And you just you just hit us with the 1, 2, 3, like beginning, and I appreciate that. Like, it's amazing, and I like how you talked about, in the island, when one person grieves, we all grieve, and so it's a communal grief
Mhm.
that everyone goes through. What got you started in your field?
It's a beautiful journey in that I started helping people when I was around six or seven. I had literally died because I was sick. My body sick to itself, and I died when I was about 6 years old. And so when I got out of the coma, I realized that I was able to pray for people and encourage them, and they felt better. And so my mom would literally bribe me to go and pray for her friends and people that wanted spiritual support. And so as I got older, I still, at times helped people and prayed for them. But it wasn't until I started my master's program that I felt God called me into chaplaincy. And so I was very young at the time. I was only 25. And I thought to myself, chaplains are usually older, they're usually male. I don't think that would be a good fit for me. And so I heard him in a non-audible voice as if I was thinking it, but I knew it wasn't my thought because I didn't want to be a chaplain. And I thought to myself, you were born for this. This is the gift that I gave you. And so you have to do it. And I said, well, I'm not going to internship. So if you really want me to do it, you're going to find me one. Within minutes, a colleague of mine walked up to me and gave me a card, and she said, you would be great for this internship. This is where you should do your internship. So I knew that that was a sign for me to basically go into chaplaincy, knowing that that's exactly where God wanted me. And in my work, I realized that I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I feel like I'm living out my purpose, and I'm grateful for that.
Indeed. Okay. And that's an amazing and a beautiful story. I did not know that at the age of 6 and 7, you practically died and went into a coma. And so here you are inspiring and helping others deal with their loss, as well. And so the question that I would ask is, growing up, did your parents or family members or the people around you teach you how to deal with grief and trauma?
Yes, because my mom would take us to hospitals and pray for people, ministry at the church, to go to different hospitals and go to people's homes and sick and the shut in. And so as a child, I watched my mom do it. And then when I turned 13, my mom told us that she had cancer. And before my 14th birthday, she died, actually. It was a very aggressive cancer. Within 3 months, she died. And so that was very difficult for me as a teenager, to deal with the loss of my mom, and to be able to work through that and help other people through that, especially at that age, because as a teenager, you're trying to figure out who you are. So you have your ideas and your experiences with someone that you can truly trust. And for me, that was my mom, and to not have her was very difficult. And so I look at grief in a special way because I had to process all of that later on when I got to college. Because as you can, correct, the body is so amazing in that my mind wasn't able to comprehend the magnitude of that loss. And so it suppressed the information until I was able to actually go through it and process it.
Is that a healthy thing? I mean, is it natural for the body to suppress?
It's natural for teenagers and children to suppress, and it's okay for them to do so, because they, at that time, if someone tried to process it with them, they may not fully understand it, and it would come back anyway. Grief is one of those things that you can't say, oh, I'm one and done. You know, you could get triggered. You could get triggered by different things throughout your journey with the same loss.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, in understanding some of these triggers, let's talk about them.
What I understand with the triggers is that one of my favorite professors named Shep Jeffries of Johns Hopkins University, he said that it's like a cowbell. To our normal lives. One of the triggers could be like a birthday, or if it's the anniversary of that death, or if it's something that father, it would be Father's Day. Until you have processed and gone through it, the triggers or the cowbells get softer and softer each year that you're processing it and you're allowing yourself to go through the grief. But it doesn't ever really go away if it's a major grief issue, especially if it was a complicated grief. It doesn't go away.
Okay. And so what are some of the common triggers?
Common triggers would be anniversaries, having someone ask you about the person if they didn't know what happened, talking to someone about losing their own loved one will bring back your feelings about the person you are grieving or the situation you're grieving, because sometimes it's a divorce, sometimes it's losing a really good job that you enjoyed, sometimes it's losing your health, sometimes it's losing your ability to move. Like if you get in an accident and you're paralyzed, grief symptoms come up with those situations as well. So it's not just loss. Anytime there's a change, you're going to experience grief.
So grief isn't just about losing someone close to you. It's about loss.
Yes, and it's about change. So whenever there's a change, there has to be a loss, because change means that what once was is no longer. And so there's a feeling of loss.
I got you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, let's step back for a moment and talk about it from a cultural standpoint. Do you feel like there's a cultural difference in how people cope with or deal with, grief?
I really do think that there's a cultural difference. Not only ethnic culture, how men grieve versus how women grieve, because it's more acceptable for women to grieve. I'm not sure why our society is set up that way, but it's more acceptable for women to grieve. So men tend to not grieve appropriately because men are not able to cry as often as women can, or it's not as acceptable. So culturally, whether it's your ethnic culture or whether you're male or female or your gender, or if you are from one part of the planet, like if you're European, differences, but as human beings, I think we all grieve. That's a common thread for all humans, but we do grieve differently based on our cultures.
Okay. And so let's talk about different ways to cope and techniques. So let's first talk about unhealthy ones. If you could share in any of your experiences of unhealthy and healthy ways of coping.
Some of the healthy ways of coping would be to allow yourself to feel sad when you need to. Oftentimes people tell you, oh, it's okay, or they'll give you a tissue and you're not done. Crying actually heals our soul. Crying is necessary. That's why children, they cry very easily because it's a natural thing. So crying and allowing yourself to have a good cry is good. Another way is to write out something that you love about the person or remember them in a loving way. Whether you want to build a foundation in their honor or you want to make meaning out of the thing that you're grieving, to make meaning out of it, to be able to learn through that experience. The third thing that I think most people can do that would be helpful is to have someone to talk to. Just talking about it and expressing yourself is so important because you get out of your own head and you're not only able to hear how you're feeling, feel how you're feeling. Someone who's empathizing with you can help you hold your feelings, if that makes sense.
Yes, can help hold your feelings, and I like how you put that. Let's expound on that for a moment. How does
Mm-hmm.
hold their feelings? Tell everyone I said hi.
Hold on 1 second, okay? Hold on.
Okay. Okay. Can you explain when you talk about speaking to someone help you to hold your feelings?
As humans, that's a gift that we all have, to be able to feel connected when we're vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Brene Brown talks about vulnerability and the power of vulnerability. And in grief, having someone that you can really truly be yourself and open up to about how you feel can be not only therapeutic because you're trusting that person to carry that grief with you, and they're empathizing with you and they're getting right in it with you, but they're also able to help you to have some distance from the grief. So it's not in your head. You're not the only one carrying it, because if when you're the only one carrying it, it feels like no one else understands, and your mind begins to try to grapple with it, and sometimes it may make some people's minds race because they're trying to handle it alone, basically. But when you have someone carrying it with you, holding it with you, emotionally and psychologically, it alleviates the burden or the pain, so that even if it's for a second, you know that someone else is right there with you and you're not alone in that process.
Gotcha. So how do you know when you're dealing with complicated grief?
With complicated grief, it's going to be a harder journey, only because complicated grief delves into more of not only your surroundings or your environment, but it goes deeper into your core or your subconscious, depending on what the situation is. It makes it complicated because there are layers that need to be processed. Someone may lose something that they really care about, like a job. It's not as complicated as someone losing a loved one through divorce, because it's not an external circumstance. It's external, and when you get a divorce, it's external and internal. So it's not just something that you're dealing with your environment, because you no longer are going to that workplace, but it's in your home, it's in your heart, it's in your environment. So there's a lot more at stake, and so it makes the grief more complicated and has many layers. So it would take a lot more work to be able to get through that, but it's definitely doable. We can get through it. We just need to have support and be able to know that it's complicated grief and not suppress it, because eventually it's going to come back out in another form.
Gotcha. Okay. So what are some signs or when we talk about thoughts and feelings that you're dealing with complicated grief, and even actions? So what are some signs that you're dealing with complicated grief, like thoughts, feelings, or actions?
That's a very good question. One of the common thoughts that you're dealing with complicated grief is a feeling of helplessness. Usually when someone is grieving over something that is very complicated and layered, it's hard to fathom being able to get out of it or get through it.
Hey guys, it's Jerome. Greg and I wanted to invite you to the community that we created for the whole Guards Down family. Jump on Facebook or check the show notes for the Guards Down Facebook group. There you'll be able to find a community of folks who are committed to raising awareness about complex grief and PTSD. Look forward to chatting with you guys in the group. Now let's get back to the episode.
And there's a feeling of helplessness that comes with that. There's also feelings of being alone, that no one else can really understand what you're going through because it's not common. Something like death by suicide, if you have a loved one that committed suicide, that's a very complicated grief, because in and of itself is not normalized and it's not as common. And so sometimes people with that kind of grief feel disenfranchised, and they don't feel like anyone else could really understand what they're going through, and they sometimes feel shame along with feeling grief.
Gotcha. So what can a person do to help themselves?
One of the things that I strongly suggest is to take time out to meditate or pray, have alone time. And I know that being in your own thoughts can be difficult when you're grieving, but using that time to reflect and journal and write down how you're feeling. Go see someone that you know can empathize with you and help you through it. A good therapist, a good grief therapist would be good. Seeing someone that you respect and know that you will be able to really let them in so that you can process the hurt, some of the pain that comes with that grief.
Okay. Now, what can a person do to help someone else that's dealing with it?
Never say you understand, because you really don't understand. When someone is grieving, you want to say that I hear you. You want to sit with them. You want to do things for them, like, come to their house and, that they haven't eaten, or, if they're really close to you, you can do errands for them, depending on how close you are to that person. But one thing that most people who are grieving don't like to hear is I understand, or I know, or they're in a better place, or you're in a better situation because you're not in the situation you were in, because those things are not helpful at the time of grief. Later on, after they've processed the grief and they've gone through it, then we could go back and reflect on why this could have happened for this reason or that reason. But at the time of grief, coming up with reasons why this could happen may not be a good thing to do. So just being with them would be good, spending time with them, listening to them, and just being a really good friend.
Okay. What's been the toughest part of your journey with all of this?
With grief,
Well, grief, trauma, helping others.
I think helping others is my life calling, so I feel like it's my life's purpose. But it's also difficult when you're helping, but you're not sure if it's helpful for them. Sometimes people come back and they say, okay, that was helpful, but to be able to reach someone or be able to really actually help that person and see a difference in their journey, that is the most rewarding for me. And it's difficult when I don't know exactly how they're doing. Being a chaplain, you see them, but you don't necessarily stay connected, and because I'm not in that position to keep up with how they're doing, and have they gotten the support that they need in the community. And so that's been the most difficult part for me, being able to just trust that God and the universe can carry them and take care of them, and I don't have to worry.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, tell me your thoughts on people that are grieving or dealing with trauma and grief, hurting other people as they're grieving in the process. How does one make amends?
I think we all as humans have to realize that hurt people hurt others. It's a fact. And if that person is going through something difficult and they're not able to express it, or they've gone through something and they didn't know how to deal with it, and it comes out in another form by either hurting someone else or hurting themselves, because oftentimes people who are hurting often hurt themselves more than they hurt other people. And to make amends, I think, would be to be honest with ourselves about the mistakes we've made, and give that person that we have offended space to bring the offense to us and for us to be able to apologize. But and to ask them, what can I do to make amends? We never want to assume that we know what is going to help someone make amends or reconcile with us, because if we offended someone, we have to allow them to give us the things that could make amends, you know? And if they don't want to make amends and they don't want to reconcile, that's okay too, because that's their prerogative. But being able to say, you know what, I'm sorry, I was in a really bad place at that time, and I am really sorry. And that's all we can do, you know?
Yeah. Now you've been, of course, you deal with this a lot, and you probably see it, more than most people, because this is, like you said, your life's work. So someone dealing with destructive behaviors, what normally causes them to change?
Unfortunately, is hitting rock bottom, being at a place where they see themselves, they truly see themselves, and they want to make that change. Most people are not aware of themselves. If I had a magic wand, I would be able to help people become aware, and really honestly take the moment to really look at themselves for what is actually going on, instead of making excuses for what is happening and why it's happening. And when I say make excuses, I don't mean to make someone who feels victimized feel like, they have to be strong. What I'm saying is to look at the situation for the reality of it. Because oftentimes when people self-destruct, it's not because of the actual event, it's because they're ruminating in their mind how bad these things are, or how bad this thing was. That's why they feel like I don't deserve to be happy. I don't deserve to, and I want to feel numb. I want to drink until I can't breathe anymore because I need to get rid of these feelings. So it's not the actual event that's the issue. It's how that person sees themselves and how they feel.
Gotcha.
Because how they feel is really going to be what makes them self-destruct, because they don't feel desirable. They don't feel like they deserve to be content or be happy or to be free of guilt, because they're just feeling really bad.
Okay. And so when you talk about hitting rock bottom, there is that increased risk factor of committing suicide.
Yeah.
Do you need to wait till you're in your darkest hour to make a change?
It depends on who you are and who is there as a support. So someone who has, like we said, culturally, someone who has family members who, when they're down, are going to be like, we're not concerned about you wanting to be alone. We're going to, Caribbean cultures and a lot of African cultures, privacy is not, they don't really adhere to it. And so they usually will, interrupt you in your privacy and ask you, what's going on, and help you through it, whether you like it or not, right? But if you are surrounded by others who think, well, they want to be left alone, so I'm going to leave them alone. Those things are a little bit more complicated, because sometimes that person says, I want to be alone, or they push people away, not because they really want to be alone. It's because they're in so much pain. Having others around them makes it more difficult. So to have someone say, I understand how you're feeling, and I understand you want to be left alone, but I'm going to be right around the corner, or I'm going to be right in the other room, or, you know, letting them know that they truly are not alone, even if they want to spend a few hours alone, but to let them know that, you know, I care about you enough that I want to help you through it. But even then, sometimes if the person gets to that,
Okay. Okay. And I appreciate you speaking to, you know, that portion of it, and talking about, you know, it really depends on the person. In that rock bottom or darkest hour or moment, you have this feeling of either I want to end it or I really want to get help.
yeah, you have a fork in the road, and that person has that choice. And sometimes it's not easy for them. Sometimes it's hereditary. A lot of people have family members who have committed suicide because of the depression that runs in their family. So it makes it more complicated than just being able to say, oh, I'm going to get help. Because someone can be very sick and not know it. So it's similar if someone has like a really bad flu, or, you know, you can't really help yourself. You really need people around you that can be there to support you. And so when you don't have those supports and you don't have anyone to really call on before it gets to that point, and you don't know those cowbell moments, you don't know your triggers, you know, you're not really aware of self, it's really hard to get the support, nearly impossible, because people are not going to know exactly where you are unless you say something. So somebody could be sitting in the room with you and they're having suicidal thoughts, but they're not saying anything. If that person who's in the room with you knows you well and you're having suicidal thoughts, they can say, oh, I see your behavior is changing. You know, let me in. Tell me what's going on. How can I help you? But if you live alone, or you have a family history of depression, or, you know, really things that could make that decision so much harder. That fork in the road is so different for everybody. And sometimes, you know, some people do succumb to the illness of depression and PTSD and those neurological illnesses because there's not enough education. And that's why I'm so grateful for what you're doing, because it allows people to have an outlet where they can talk to someone that truly understands, you know, and truly gets it, and will not say, oh, I understand, just to say I understand, but they will know that you understand by just simply being who you are, you know. So I think this is a wonderful idea.
Appreciate that. I really do. I wanted to go back to what you talked about in the beginning about communal grief. And so just from a cultural aspect, how do the Haitian culture, how do you feel the Haitian culture processes grief? Like what is there a ritual? Uh, you know, do you celebrate, you know, that person's life every year, you know, in honor of them?
So generally speaking, they usually um, spend at least a year grieving that person, and they would wear all black to symbolize that I'm a grieving person. So anyone that encounters them will know I need to be sensitive because this person is grieving. So that helps, because people will be more sensitive to a person if they know that they're grieving, right? So in the communal grief is good, like when, especially when the grief is acute or it's fresh and the person has just lost something or someone. Having a lot of people over is one of the things that communal grieving does. People never leave you alone. Like sometimes it can be overbearing. Individuals can often feel overwhelmed with having so much support, because sometimes it is good to be by yourself. But to have people, coming in and out, it does help to get your mind off of what you're going through, because they'll tell stories, they'll try to make you laugh. So it's helpful in the Haitian community to have the communal grieving. If you're from the Haitian culture and adhere to it, it's helpful. But sometimes if you were raised in the US and you tend to be more individualistic, you may not necessarily find it helpful. So it's really up to that person to come up with things that will make them feel validated and feel loved during that time.
Got you. Okay. Well, we're getting ready to wrap it up, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing.
Thank you for having me.
I want to give you this time to talk about any efforts that you're doing. How can people reach you if they want to learn more or talk with you?
Well, right now I am working on this program where I am a pain doula. So I help people process pain and help them heal through their painful experiences through spiritual and emotional techniques. And so if anyone, just desires to have someone to help them process any pain that they're going through, they can reach me. I also am a children's book author. It just came to me and I wrote the book and it's just out there. So if anyone wants to teach their children about resilience and identity, Journeys of Butterfly Chloe would be a great addition to their library. And I am Journeys of Butterfly Chloe.
Yep. And where can they find it?
Oh, on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, wherever books are sold. Yeah.
And what was the last thing you was about to say?
And the last thing is that I have a YouTube video that as a chaplain, I like to give people biblical stories and teach them how it's relevant in our lives today. So if you go to my YouTube channel, just type my name on YouTube and you'll find it. My channel talks about different stories. The last one I shared was about one of them I talked about was Queen Esther and how she was basically fostered. It really talks about being a foster child and becoming royalty. So it doesn't matter how you begin, whatever God has for you, or whatever you work towards, you can achieve it regardless of where you come from, and not to let anyone or anything stop you from achieving your highest potential. So stuff like that is on my YouTube channel. So if anybody wants to have biblical stories and how it impacts their lives.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you again for coming on and speaking with us. Any words of encouragement that you want to give on the way out?
I just want to tell everyone that you are loved more than you could ever imagine. And it doesn't matter if you haven't heard it in a while, but that you make a difference in someone's life by just watching this video. you're making a difference, because you're educating yourself on how to be there for yourself and to be there for others during their times of grief. So you are important to me and to the call of our soldiers, and helping them to realize that, you know, the guards can come down, and that we're here to support one another, and we're here to help each other, and you're not alone in this process.
Um,
Yeah.
This is Greg and Gerdine telling all y'all to stay safe, stay focused, and stay engaged.
Bye.
That's what it's really all about. You know, giving yourself a fighting chance to just show what you got.